Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Kind of a Bitch. I love talking about things that have juxtaposing views. That's one thing I love about this podcast title. The thinking behind this podcast is that in many ways, the word bitch is a positive and a negative. When people say, "Oh my god, she's such a bitch," I kind of want to say, which kind? The good kind? A good bitch or a bad bitch? And that to me, there's so much in there. And I really want to play with some of these ideas where there are two opposing sides, two sides of the same coin. And in today's episode, I want to talk about something that might sound a little bit counterintuitive. It is that freedom actually requires boundaries, guidelines, and rules. Freedom requires that type of mm, containment in order to feel free. And I really do believe this, though I have gone in and out of feeling this for years and years, depending on what my career was at the time. I really used to believe that freedom meant waking up without an alarm clock, without a plan. I felt like it was doing what I wanted when I wanted. It felt like having maybe zero obligations, just all things that I could enjoy and do at my leisure. And I think there was a period of time where I maybe thought that structure was the enemy of creativity, of joy, of spontaneity. But recently, I have been on my TikTok scroll, as we all are, don't come at me for it. I have seen this concept of a sprint week or sprint month is really what this gal was talking about. And I can't get it out of my head. This idea of a sprint month. And the idea is that you're taking small, consistent action towards the goals that you want to achieve. And those things could range in so many different ways. Um, and I will get more to that sprint week a little bit later here, but something that I discovered being a self-employed person, not only being a self-employed person and a gig worker, but also being someone who had a 9 to 5 office job, is that it really illuminated the discontent I felt when I was in those structure free for all phases. I would find myself doing things that I could call busy, but I wouldn't actually be productive. I would end up scrolling for a longer period of time in my pajamas. I would get annoyed with myself by 3 or 4 o'clock because I felt like, wow, I was doing things, quote unquote, all day, but I wasn't actually getting anything done and I wasn't moving towards the things that I cared about. So when I ask myself, well, was the freedom really worth it? Or was it really freedom? Not really, because that lack of structure has only continued to perpetuate the lack of freedom that I feel in my own life. It was not freedom, it was actually chaos. So, this episode is really going to be more about reclaiming the power behind routine, behind boundaries, behind some discipline in the name of freedom. And again, not just time management, not just discipline in the goal setting like work side of things, but also in how we treat our energy, how we pursue our purpose, and how we can tap into more of that self-worth. If you have listened to more than an episode or two, you will see most of these episodes are around things that I am currently exploring for myself. So I hope that you listen to this and know that I am here in the trenches with you trying to figure out how can I apply more of this to my life so that I can get where I want to go. First and foremost, let's talk about the myth of boundless freedom. I think that we live in a culture that kind of idolizes and glamorizes boundless freedom. We see everyone on the TikTok and on the Instagram posting about their trips to Italy and how there's a lot of talk about I stay home and I make millions of dollars, or I work 4 hours a week and I make all of this money. And I have really found that to become a little bit tiring. I've even had people who I really have considered mentors and people that I look up to, I have found that even that kind of talk starts to happen where you can stay at home and live your soft girl life, but achieve boss babe dreams. And I'm not going to say that it's not true, but I do think we're missing a lot of context in those statements. The idea of boundless freedom, the total flexibility, not having a boss, not having a schedule, unlimited choice, right? But the science behind this is that in reality, having some type of structure, having fewer options can really make us happy. There's a scientist, Barry Schwartz, and his whole thinking is behind the paradox of choice. And that study teaches us that the more options we have, uh, does not necessarily indicate making us happier. In fact, they make us more anxious and paralyzed. I think about this all the time when I step into my closet. Yes, it is time. It is time for a closet clean out. I used to listen to a podcast called The Minimalists, and it is truly incredible if you are interested in going down a more minimalist route. But one of the things they talk about on there is that by minimizing the amount of stuff, amount of things that you have in your home, in your closet, in your car, minimizing the amount of choice that you have actually makes decision making so much, number one, easier because you don't have as much choice, but you get more time back because you are not getting exhausted in the world of trying to figure out what the heck am I wearing today. And I will tell you, I stand in my closet full of clothes that I love, that I've worn, that I have really enjoyed. And I look around and I go, I have nothing to wear. And it's because there are too many things. There's also this idea, it's called the cognitive load theory, and it tells us that our brains can only process so many things at one time. So a day with no plans or a closet with unlimited clothing means that our mind is working overtime to make decisions all day. This to me, this brings me right back to different plans that I have had with friends, with family, where it's like, we're going on a vacation and we're just going to take it day by day. We're just going to figure it out as we go. We're just going to, and I, for a long time, thought that maybe like it was my fault that I would come to these vacations and think to myself, why am I feeling so stressed out? Because there are simply too many choices. There's too many what's happening, when's the next thing? When do I have to be ready for the next thing? What should I prepare for? What kind of things should I pack? All right, one of the short stories that I think really encapsulates this feeling for me is my proposal story. Yes, did you think that the episode about freedom and boundaries was going to include a story about my proposal? No, you didn't. But here you go. Come with me. So, when my husband and I got engaged, we had been living on cruise ships for years, and I, I just didn't. I was pretty upfront about the fact that if you propose to me while we are working on that boat, I will say no with so much love. I do not want to walk back on that boat and have an entire cast of people know my business immediately. You know what I'm saying? I just felt I needed that moment to be protected and be just for me. But the day of this proposal, I, number one, could already I felt an energy. That's the best way I can describe this. And I remember saying to my then boyfriend that we were going out to a dinner. It was going to be a surprise date night. And I had asked, like, what should I wear? What kind of activity are we doing? He just said, it's just a surprise. And I started panicking because to me, I'm going, okay, what kind of a surprise are we talking here? Are we talking a surprise where I should be wearing hiking boots? Are we talking a surprise where I can wear heels? Are we going to be walking a lot? Am I going to get sweaty? Is it going to be windy? Should I put my hair up? Should I bring it down? Do I need to wear sunscreen? Should I have sunglasses with me? Right? I'm thinking to myself, like, what is the vibe of the surprise? And I believe if I had had just a little bit more direction, if I had a little more containment of the choices that I would have to make, I would not have spun into a spiral about I just don't know what to wear and I'm panicking. I ended up panicking because I just didn't know. I felt there was an energy. Is it going to be a proposal? Is it not going to be? And eventually, I'll tell the rest of our proposal story again at some point. But eventually, at some point, he gave me a total decoy plan so that I could focus, I could anchor on that plan and relax. And there is something about having too many options, too many decisions, too many possibilities that I think really, for me, did not help me relax, did not give me the freedom to enjoy the getting ready before. You know what I'm saying? Bringing this back to that cognitive load theory, the idea is that when your environment has no structure, your brain is working overtime. It's like trying to I don't know, it's spinning your wheels. It's running in sand, right? You're exhausted, you're getting tired, but you're not really going anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Um, Another great example is as I look at planning group travel, there is something very specific about planning group travel because you want to make sure the other people in the group have the same vibe as you have, the same idea of structure, the same idea of boundaries and freedom and whatever. And I think a lot of times when we are planning group travel, there's always someone who is super duper structured with absolutely no flexibility. And then there's someone who's a little bit more, it's flowy. We'll just see what the day brings. And I definitely tend to lean more on the structured side unless we have specified that the day will be a nothing day, right? And I find that those ones, the ones where the expectation is that it's going to be flowy and we'll figure out things as we go, end up leading to more stress because you're looking ahead going, oh man, I wish we would have booked that thing. Now we can't get into that reservation. Now we should have booked ahead so that we had XYZ number of seats at this event, right? Those things start to add up. And then you end up coming home from that vacation and you feel more stressed because you've been working overtime to make those decisions. The same thing happens when you have an off day, a day off, and you kind of spend it lounging. You spend it kind of chilling and doing nothing. And you end up going to bed that night and you're like, wow, I'm exhausted. And you ask yourself, oh my gosh, am I exhausted from a day of doing nothing? And it truly, again, by nightfall, you feel worse than you felt the day before, knowing that you had the day off because there was no structure, there was no boundary, there was no plan for the freedom. Boundaries give your brain clarity, right? They anchor our nervous system, they anchor us. In my opinion, creating boundaries leads to more self trust and more self respect. And when I'm saying boundaries here, I'm also saying structure, rules, boundaries in general. One of my favorite authors, speakers, researchers is Brene Brown. You've heard of her, I'm sure. And something that she says is daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. And the idea here is that people with the strongest boundaries are also tend to be really compassionate. Why? Well, it's because they're not running on resentment fumes. They're not doing the hypervigilance of figuring out what's going to come next or what will be allowed that maybe makes them feel uncomfortable. They tend to be more rested. They tend to be clearer. There are rules for engaging with them. Boundaries teach others how to treat you, but more importantly, they teach you how to trust yourself, that you'll honor your own needs. I know for me personally, there there were years, I would say probably only until the last few, that the amount of stress that I caused myself over not having clear boundaries, about not having rules for things that I would and would not do for or with others, it provided a lot of stress. It gave me, I would even say, I don't want to say that it went so far as resentment, but for sure there are feelings of like, ugh, God, I have to go and do this thing because I don't just have a hard and fast rule. And there are things about my life now with people where I say, okay, a new rule of mine is if I have Actually, this is one that I do a lot now. I am not a fan of obligatory travel. If the travel starts to feel obligatory, where I'm traveling for others, I'm traveling with others, but in a way that only serves them, then I really question whether or not I'm going to do it. And yes, of course, that means that there are certain things where I go, ugh, we're gonna go to, an event that I'm not particularly interested in. I have to either reframe, know what the reframe is to understand what the exchange is for me, or I have to decide that I'm not going to go. And that has led to certain things. As I mentioned earlier, group travel is really hard. It requires a very specific uh, alignment of energies for all the people who are traveling. And it has happened more than once in the past few years where people have messaged me. It actually just happened a few weeks ago. A girlfriend messaged me and said, "Hey, we are planning on going to XYZ location. Would you guys have any interest in going?" And I looked at Voter and we looked at our schedules for a hot second and we kind of said, wow, during that time, we have a lot of other stuff going on. We have a wedding that we need to go to. He has some work travel. There were a number of things that were happening all in a short period of time. And so I start saying to myself, okay, I might be interested in going in this thing, but I know that it will probably add more stress onto my plate. So let me get some more clarification about what the expectations are on this trip for that other couple. And so I had asked, is this a group thing? Is this just a couple trip? Like what does this look like? And it turns out that it was part of a larger group experience. Now, I have no problem with group travel. I personally really enjoy it at times, but I was assessing, okay, during the period of time that we're planning on going, I am going to feel a little bit overwhelmed by my work and my travel already. And so, looking at the amount of money that would be spent, the type of experience that we would have, and the fact that we would be surrounded by other people that we didn't know, that would then activate my own need to people please and make sure that other people were having a good time, that the self-sacrificing syndrome, right? Knowing that that would probably all come up and I would be spending money and potentially creating more stress for myself, I said, that's not worth it for me. That isn't for us right now where we are at. That is not worth it for me right now. I said to my friend, I love you so much. We are kind of tapped out on travel expenses and group travel at the moment. If you guys wanted to plan something that was more of a couple trip, just us, we would be super down. But for a group travel experience, that's not something we can do right now. And at some point in my life, I'm sure those boundaries would have really made me uncomfortable, but by learning to set them and by learning to be very clear about kind of what the exchange is and whether or not it is worth it for me, I have been able to create my own self trust, like trust in myself that I will follow my own boundaries, that I will honor my own needs, even if it can potentially create a slightly uncomfortable conversation. So if you don't trust yourself and honor your own time, boundaries, goals, whatever, like why would anyone else do that? You know what I'm saying? It's not just about saying no. It is about saying yes to the stuff that really matters to you. Whether, again, that is rest, that is goals, that is creativity, that is simply being present in the moment. There's just so many ways to go about that. Boundaries. Let's talk about the science. I believe that structure creates the flow. And I think a lot of these studies will probably back me up on this. There was a Harvard study that found that progress, even small bits, but progress in a direction creates motivation and more fulfillment. That creates more dopamine. There was a researcher, Charles Duhigg, and his whole philosophy around the habit loop. It shows us that habits remove decision friction. And I love that phrase, decision friction. Again, it's that idea of walking into your closet and having too many things to wear and there being this friction. Why did Steve Jobs wear the same thing all the time? Why do a lot of these people who achieve big things wear the same thing often? It's because it removes that decision friction. Incredible. When our lives have some type of predictable rhythm. Again, not monotony, but predictable rhythm. Your brain doesn't waste as much energy. And that's not a boring bit. I mean, I guess it can be depending on who you're talking to. I think it's actually kind of brilliant. There's a book that I read long ago when I had moved to New York. I was going through a breakup and trying to I was trying to give myself any ounce of like actionable steps towards happiness that I could give myself. And so I read the book called The Happiness Project, and that's by Gretchen Rubin. And I remember reading that book. I was so mind blown by it. It is a short and easy read. I would highly recommend it. The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. She gives these actionable small steps to create more happiness in your life on the day to day. And something she writes in there is when what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. Right? The things that you do every day matters more than the thing that you do every once in a while. And of course, I think there are also some incredible studies that also bring in this idea of spontaneity and of having things that pull you out of that daily habit. I think that is also incredibly important, and perhaps I will cover it in a different episode. But in this particular one, the idea of having some type of routine, some type of predictable step in your day creates more long-term and sustainable happiness. I know, and I'm honestly in that season right now. I really resisted a morning routine, really resisted it. And there were a few years there where I was very on top of my wake up, have my water, do my small meditation, journal. I had a very set routine. And I don't know. At some point, I just started feeling a little bit rebellious. And I said to myself, I'm not going to freaking do that. I don't need that. And I will tell you, I can feel myself needing to get back into it. And I wouldn't say necessarily that I crave it yet, but I do believe, kind of like when you start feeding your body really healthy, nutritious foods, you start to get excited for those healthy, nutritious foods because of the way that it makes you feel. So I know that at least for me, when I know that my brain and my body will get my coffee, will get some movement, will get, I don't know, a few pages of journaling if I'm really in that routine, that is when I feel the most grounded, grateful, and generous. Now here is where the fun part comes in. Creativity does need a container. This is the way that I kind of always looked at it. I have done two different professions here, right? I have complete 100% entrepreneur artist, don't know, where I'm going or what I'm doing and just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And then I also have the 9 to 5, there every day, following the rules and regulations and sometimes arbitrary routine that is happening there. We've always done this, so we continue to always do this. And I've really gotten to see kind of both. I don't know, both ways to do it. And what I can say is that when I've been in the containers where things feel very routine, things feel very stuck, things feel like we are just doing these things because that's how it's always been done. Those containers, I start to feel, oh, I want freedom. I want to understand why. Why are we doing it this way? Why do we have to keep doing this way? Is there something different we could be doing to make it better? I really start to crave that. However, when I've been in the environments which honestly, I'm feeling like I'm in one right now, where I have created my own systems, my own structure. All of this is purely my own creation. It has not been dictated by anybody else. I start to go, what am I doing? Like I can't see the page anymore. I can't see the canvas that I'm painting on. I have always found it a lot easier. Like if someone says, we want you to create something. I've always thrived in environments where there is a direction, where there's maybe some guidelines or some rules, and I can create within those lines than someone just handing me a blank sheet of paper and saying, make art. I've always preferred something that has a little bit more direction. And I think for me, that's where this really comes in. So Elizabeth Gilbert, another, incredible author and speaker, her book, Big Magic, she talks about how she writes at the same time every day. And I have talked about this with my writer friends, where sometimes you fall off the train of feeling motivated. You fall off the train of feeling creative. And at least for me, when I know I'm in a space of creating, I'm creating a new speech, or I'm putting together a new course, or whatever that looks like, when I stop giving myself the space, like the scheduled time to do that thing, I stop feeling the muscle. I stop feeling the urge to be creative. And I talk about that, as I mentioned, with some of my writer friends, where sometimes you fall off that train. You get in the habit of saying, okay, I have stuff to write, I have jokes to create, I have stories to tell. But if you don't actually put aside the time to write them down, you kind of stop feeling the urge. You lose the urge. And something that she had mentioned was she writes at the same time every day. And her note here is, why did she do that? Because she made a deal with the muse. If the muse doesn't show up, like the creative genius doesn't show up, she writes anyway. And again, it might not be the best writing, and might not be the most, I don't know, poignant piece that you've ever written. It might not be anything that you keep or that you show to anybody else, but getting in the habit of doing it anyways, even if you are not feeling particularly inspired, is what's important. And she noted here, done is better than good. Done is better than good. And I personally prefer done is better than perfect, because I don't know, I think I always tend to try and move towards the perfection side. But even saying done is better than good, having the space where you've just spewed out something, where you've just created something, even if it's total crap, done is better than good. Also, psychologists will call it creative constraint, which I love. I'm going to take that with me. Creative constraint. It's the idea that limitations actually boost innovation. Dr. Seuss wrote Green Eggs and Ham using only 50 words because of a bet. Are you dead? Did you know that fun fact? I did not until the creation of this episode. Dr. Seuss wrote Green Eggs and Ham using only 50 words because of a bet that he had taken. The limit of the words he could use is what made that book absolutely iconic, and something that all of us will treasure for the rest of forever. And so that's the other piece, is I think too, why are things like trends and um, challenges and follow along on my journey to XYZ, why is that so viral on socials? And it's, number one, it's interesting to watch, but number two, the creator has given themselves a limitation, a corral. They've corralled themselves into kind of a restricted structure to produce more, to give themselves less room to go, what should I create today? And I love that. I think about this, dance, again, an art form, has 8 counts usually. Music has time signatures. These rules, they don't create restriction. They don't restrict expression, I guess is what I should say, but they do help channel more expression, right? And so I guess that's what I'm saying to myself here, is if I continue to believe that my ideas need unlimited space, um, I'm I'm probably I'm probably stalling, or maybe avoiding the vulnerability of starting and feeling like a beginner. Boop, that's my call out. Okay, let's talk about systems. Let's talk about systems. Has anyone read Atomic Habits? I'm going to be honest. I thought that book was freaking incredible. And here and there, I think the last couple of years, I like to listen to the audio book now. But James Clear in Atomic Habits said, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. You know, every yes is a no, every no is a yes. When we create systems, we are voting for a calmer, more intentional version of ourselves. Now, I wish I could say that I time block. I do not. And that is something that I would really like to get into and be better about holding. But what I will tell you is that something that I struggle with is, as someone who doesn't time block, one of the reasons that I always say I don't time block is because I am quick to sacrifice that time if it is only for me. That is why I hire people like trainers, my personal trainer, like my coach, like my vocal coach, like my accountability sessions, all these things that are with other people. It creates an accountability to show up because somebody else is there. Not just time where I show up and it's just me, myself, and I. Now, I wish that was a different thing, but it isn't. Another incredible book, and I believe it is also Gretchen Rubin. She talks about the 4 types, and I personally really loved it because this idea is that it you your type is determined by how you respond to expectations. Okay, your type is determined by how you respond to expectations. And the 4 types are upholders. Upholders respond readily to outer and inner expectations. Questioners question all expectations. They'll meet an expectation if they think it makes sense. So that's whether that is an internal expectation or an external expectation. Obligers meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations they impose on themselves. And then rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. I would highly recommend you read this book. It goes so much deeper than just that very brief overview, but I personally tend to lean towards questioner and obliger. So I always kind of want to know why. Why is this important? What's the vision? I need to have a pretty clear vision of what we're going for it to make sense to me why I would do something. But number 2, I tend to struggle, and I know this of myself, with honoring time that is just mine and only includes me. So if I put a time block on my calendar for this is time for me to rest or take a nap or blah, 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 and then a client calls and says that they need help with something or they want to see a house or whatever, I tend to prioritize the thing that has to do with somebody else. So that is why I hire people to help me, because I know that if I put, hey, from 9 to 10 on Fridays, I'm meeting with my personal trainer. I've already paid for that session. She's expecting me. You know what I mean? It just makes it easier for me to show up in that way. So knowing my own, like how I can push my own, how I can work with my own tendencies, I guess is the best way of saying it. Creating that restriction, that guideline that works with my own tendencies. So I do have calendar boundaries. I like to put that on the calendar. I try to do some content batching here and there, but to be honest, I'm not very great at it. And again, I would love to be better at this. This is sort of where I'm getting to here. I would like to be better at this because I do love feeling like I have a routine, like I have direction, like I have some guidelines that I'm following. And I love this because I know that when I'm doing that, I have more peace. I have more freedom. I just know that during this time, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to worry about when is my next reel being posted. I don't have to worry about, did I specify a gift that's being sent out to a client? No, because I already worked it into the schedule. I've already created it. I have the system. I have the structure. It's already created. Again, your systems do not have to look like mine, but I think that if you are starting to feel scattered, if you're starting to feel a little bit listless or like you have too many ideas, which if you're not watching this, I'm raising my hand because that is fully me. It does not mean that you're broken or that your approach is ineffective, but I do think that it means you might need to make some decisions once by setting some boundaries and some structure instead of redeciding, renegotiating those decisions every day. I want to talk about this phrase that I brought up at the beginning of the episode, a sprint month. I saw on TikTok this woman talking about her sprint month, and it's the idea that for 1 month, you go all in on the goals that you are trying to achieve. Again, those could be big, those could be small, but you show up intentionally every day with the activities, the actions, the routine that will forward those goals. This, again, it's not forever. And there is, I would say, a little bit more of a rigid structure to it, potentially, depending on what your goals are. But I do think it can be transformative. And I have been fiddling with trying to do this. And I would say I've done it in little ways. Like one of the things that I have told myself I'm doing for the entire month of June, and so far I have not skipped one, is every morning I will wake up, I will take my probiotic, I will drink water with my probiotic, and then I will have my coffee. And it is a small thing. It is just taking my probiotic. That is literally it. Just to be clear, that's all I'm doing is just taking a probiotic. But I do like that I have not missed one yet. I even put it in my calendar. Every morning I have it in my calendar. Look, I'll show you. There it is, right there. Probiotic. Probiotic, water, coffee, and then I've also put a protein thing in there. Like I mentioned, a sprint month is a short, focused period of higher structure, higher intention, and better boundaries. It is project-based discipline. You're not saying no to all fun, for sure, but you are saying this month has a mission. This month I'm trying to work towards a specific outcome. And the idea is that you kind of want to see like how, if I show up this way as this highest version, as this most productive version, as this healthiest version, whatever that looks like for you, whatever the goal is, um, how will my life be different at the end of this month? Because it's just a month. I think about this. Athletes train in cycles. Businesses and financial institutions have quarters. So why not plan our energy in this way as well? Now, I know it doesn't always work exactly perfect because life happens and we can't always predict how that's going to look. But I know for me, this feels, I don't know, like kind of a juicy, exciting option for me. So I think the way that I'm going about it is I want to define one key outcome or theme. Like one theme, and if that is overall health, then great. If that is launching a new product, if that is creating a better SOP system for my real estate business, whatever that looks like, that's where I would start. Then I would work backwards, going, okay, if this was the goal that I'm trying to achieve, what would that potentially look like? What would that potentially look like in a 4-week period? Okay, now that I have a weekly thing, what will that look like now in a day-to-day calendar? So you use those things that you've all written down to then set the boundaries. You put the calendar blocks, you write in, I'm going to take my probiotic and have my protein and by 8 a.m. every day. You set it on the calendar, you set aside the time in a most likely, I'm guessing it will change how you accept different social plans, whether you will accept them sooner or later, whether you will decline them altogether, depending on your goals, and also focusing on the other healthier stuff like getting better sleep or whatever, so that you can actually wake up and achieve those things. Again, you use this container to create more momentum because after the month is done, like, of course, you can go back to doing whatever you want. But my guess is that because we've taken some of these actions, because we've taken this consistent action of showing up in a specific way, it's going to create more forward motion, not burnout, but it'll help us get into the flow. That's what I think. And I feel a little bit excited about this thing. I want to reiterate, this does not mean showing up every day and having every hour of your time planned on that calendar. You could have, I need a 2-hour nap in the afternoon, and you budget that into the system and you hold on to it, right? Whatever that kind of looks like for you. I think that having a very intentional approach to it is the key. I think this is the difference between kind of hoping that something happens or deciding that it will happen. I think it is a conscious, time bound container for your ambition. Yeah, that's what I think. So again, if I'm looking at June, I'm it's now June. It's now not the beginning of June. Ideally, I would have done this sooner, but oh well, I didn't. Sorry, here we are. I will look ahead and say, okay, if June is my, my podcast sprint month, for example, the biggest focus, I'm going to be batching content. I'm going to schedule guests and research time, and I'm going to then figure out how to streamline the back end. Right. So I'm looking at that. Or I can look ahead and say, okay, we have a couple of events in July. So maybe August is going to be my business sprint month. It's going to be nearing the end of the summer. Most likely, some of the real estate world is going to kind of die down a little bit as people move towards going back to school. So perhaps that's the time when I say I'm going to be very clear about setting out the quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four activities. I'm going to get my standard operating procedure really dialed in for if and when I do want to hire people. I'm going to be, I don't know, very clear about my client outreach programming and what that will look like. I will get all of my templates dialed in for when I'm sending emails and outreach, right? There's this kind of, I don't know, this kind of stuff that I think would really, because it's just 1 month, maybe it is just 1 month of focusing really hard on one specific goal that you have and then seeing what happens afterwards. Um, and though I know that there might be things that come up in that month that make it so that I can't be totally consistent, I do think committing to something for 30 days, even if it ends up meaning that you only do 25 of the 30 days, you will be so much further than if you don't plan at all. The science support here is the Parkinson law, and it's the idea that work expands to fill the time allotted. Work expands to fill the time allotted. And this, when I saw this, I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. When I worked my nonprofit job, I would sit there at my computer and go, I am here from 8 a.m. until 4, whatever, 8 a.m. until 5. And I'm looking at this computer, and half the time I'm here for this entire time. Half the time, I've looked at my tasks and what I'm supposed to be doing. And I would say, this is actually only taking me 2 hours. This is only taking me 2 hours. Why do I have to be here? Like, what is the point of being at this desk if this is only taking me 2 hours to do? And so instead, what would naturally happen is that things would start to take longer and longer and longer because I was sitting at that desk arbitrarily. And listen, if you have a different opinion about what it means to be back to work and working at a desk, by all means, live your life. I am not here to debate. But for me personally, I do not think that it is a productive use of time to have employees sitting at desks. When if you reduced their time working, like a 4-hour work week, for example, you might find that people are actually able to get things done faster because that amount of time has been reduced. By giving yourself shorter windows, you compress distraction and you expand action. By giving yourself shorter windows, you expand the action and you compress distraction. I love that. To me, that feels very true. I would also say that this kind of a sprint month, that sprint creates that dopamine loop once again, quicker wins, clearer outcomes, visible progress, because you've already created that plan. So you've got more stuff to check off, which feels very rewarding. And then again, I think you have to clarify the reframe here. At least I know I will have to, because I am quick to fall into like boss babe mentality. And then I sometimes will shame myself because I know that boss babe mentality is not that healthy. But I also don't know if I really fit into soft girl era, which is the other persona that seems to be very popular right now. Do I want to be a boss babe? Do I want to be a soft girl? I kind of want to have a mixture of both. And so I think clarifying the point of a sprint month here, it is not to burn yourself out. It is not to work harder than you've ever worked. It is not to do 75 hard, which, if you are someone who has done that or have seen it, that for me is too rigid. That is too intense. I think that it completely undermines the amount of effort you're putting in, because the rule there is that if you miss one day or one action item in that 75-day period, you have to start over, which I do not think a sprint month, that's not what a sprint month is about. So again, it is not hustle culture. It is finding a rhythm. It is finding a rhythm so that you can achieve what you want to achieve in this life. And then I would say, I don't know, maybe after a sprint month, you take a coast month. So maybe it's a sprint month and you work your booty off and you show up and you make sure that you're prioritizing the thing that you said you wanted by being very, very clear on that vision. And then maybe you take a coast month and you take a rest, and it's all about more joy and more rest and more relaxation. Or maybe it's just a slower season. I don't know. I personally think these cycles do create some sustainability. That's just me. So I am curious, this last wrap up on sprint month. I'm really curious if there are things that you are thinking about, what would be your sprint month, whether that is in a health way, like exercise or eating or drinking more water or whatever that looks like. Is that a career based thing? Is that a savings financial sprint month? What does that look like? I'm so curious. If you have one thing that you're wanting to sprint towards, I would love if you shot me a DM or texted me, because I think that when we share what we're all working towards, we all get inspired to go after what we are working towards. So please send them my way. All right. So this last little button here, we are nearing the end of this episode, and I am curious about how I can integrate everything that we've talked about. And so perhaps you will like this as well. I will probably after this sit down and journal a little bit on what are the areas in my life that I crave more freedom. And then how could structure help create more of that freedom? If I'm thinking to myself, okay, I would like to enjoy the Seattle summer. We only have a short window of time here in this state to really get out and enjoy it. And especially with what's happening in our climate, we are predicted to have a much smokier summer. So I got to get out there and do it. So where do I crave more freedom? I want more freedom to go out and explore and enjoy Seattle while I can. So how can structure help? Structure could be that I agree to take every Thursday off. What if I did that all summer? What if I took every Thursday off? And it doesn't mean that I won't do any work, but that I will be outside and mobile, perhaps. Or maybe it does mean that I'll do no work. Ooh, I don't know. Maybe I'll just take Thursday afternoons and evenings off. I don't know. See, I'm already negotiating. What would that look like then if I don't have Thursdays? Well, that would mean that Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays would have to look a certain way, and I would need to move my XYZ sessions to Friday. I would need to make sure that my home pulls are always being done on Friday mornings and not Thursdays, right? There's a way that I would then start to move that around so that I create more structure in my other days so that I have that freedom on that specific day. I don't know. Maybe we start there. Another prompt: what is one boundary I could set this week to protect my energy? I've actually already done one, and it felt kind of funky at first, but then I was just really honest about what I wanted, when I didn't want, and it made me feel a lot better. Had to do with socializing. Another one: where am I relying on willpower when a system could carry the load? That feels like so much of my business right now. Where am I relying on willpower when a system could carry the load? Oh, good. I will be journaling on that for sure. So if you find those prompts particularly helpful, take a minute and journal about them and see where it leads you. Let's reframe the freedom here. Again, it is not about the absence of limits. It is not about the absence of limits. It's about the presence of action, presence of movement towards your purpose. Boundaries, I don't believe, block you in. They do not block you in. They don't put you in a box, but they do build a container that can help you create more joy, have more creativity, prioritize more rest, and potentially give you a little more power because you're not flailing in other directions. There's an incredible play called Grace or the Art of Climbing. Grace or the Art of Climbing. And she talks a lot about she discusses how rock climbing can be compared to a lot of other things. And she says that when you are rock climbing and you're on that wall, the idea is that when you make that move to grab the next hold, you are moving directly towards it. You are you are condensing your energy into focused and specific movement so that you are not flailing your body all over the place and expending unnecessary energy, because you're going to get tired hanging on that wall. And that is what this is. Boundaries and a container allows you to be more specific and more direct with the action and the movement that you're taking. So try adding one extra little bit of structure in this week. If that is something as simple as waking up, taking your probiotic, drinking your water, having your coffee, and putting a protein shake in your coffee, which I am doing and I would highly recommend, maybe that's it. Maybe it is a full morning ritual or routine. Maybe it is having no email time and actually turning off your computer or your phone or deleting apps. Perhaps it is a real life cutoff time. Let your boundaries set you free in other areas. All of that said, wow. Thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. I personally feel excited. I am going to write down some of my sprint month stuff once I get off of this recording. If you are listening to this and there's something that really stood out to you, please, by all means, reshare this podcast, tag me, DM me about your biggest takeaway from this episode. I would really love to know what boundaries or what guidelines, rules, or structure you are going to start to put in place if there's something that really stood out there, to create more freedom. And again, if this episode, for whatever reason, is standing out in your mind or it's striking a chord, please share. Please rate and write a review. That allows people to find us a little bit easier. And in my heart of hearts, I hope that this podcast reaches as many people as possible who might resonate with hearing other people going through what they're going through. Clarity and guidelines create more freedom. And the research backs it. The momentum that I feel when I set those boundaries and when I create that structure really has proved it to me. And this has lit me up to go off into the world and create some of this for myself today. So I hope it has for you as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in and listening wherever and whenever you are taking in this podcast. I hope to see you next time. As always, send me a DM. Feel free to text me with your thoughts, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.